One viral gesture. One brutally honest interview. One surprise moment with a former president. And suddenly, the wasn't just dominating sports headlines, it was pulling the entire internet into a firestorm that nobody could look away from. Because this wasn't just about basketball anymore. This was about controversy, loyalty, pressure, fame, friendship, and what happens when a league's biggest stars collide with the biggest conversations in sports. And right in the middle of it all were Sophie Cunningham, Caitlin Clark, Brittney Griner, and Barack Obama. But here's the part that makes this story impossible to dismiss. Just when fans thought they had everything figured out, who was against who stood for what, who was feuding, who was being targeted, and who was being defended, real life stepped in and shattered the script. Because the truth turned out to be way messier, and way more human, than the internet wanted it to be. And by the end of this story, you may look at everything that happened that week in a completely different way. Subscribe so before we get into it, if you love deep sports stories, high-stakes drama, and the emotional side of the game that never shows up in the box score, hit subscribe right now and stay with me until the end, because this story keeps changing, and the final twist says more about that than any panel debate ever could. When Sophie Cunningham spoke, the entire conversation changed. Sophie Cunningham has never built her reputation on being quiet. She doesn't play like someone trying not to offend people. She doesn't talk like someone rehearsing corporate answers. And whether people love that about her or hate it, one thing is clear: when Sophie Cunningham speaks, people pay attention. That became even more obvious when published a feature on July 21, 2026, centered on Cunningham's rise, her visibility, and the storm surrounding her image in the league. In that piece, she addressed the backlash over her comments on transgender athletes in women's sports, and she did it without softening her position. She said, "I got a lot of negative feedback about me hating trans. And I'm like, I never once said that. I think that I am here to extend love. But I also think with that love is truth, being honest. And I want to protect young girls in a locker room, or young girls in sport who shouldn't have to go against biological men." And that quote hit like a thunderclap. Not because Sophie Cunningham was the first person in sports to speak on that issue. Not because the topic was new. But because of who she was in that moment, a player already sitting at the center of public attention, already known as one of the fiercest defenders of Caitlin Clark, already carrying a reputation as someone who would say what others wouldn't. So when she said it, the reaction wasn't mild. It was immediate. Emotional. Polarized. To some people, she was saying out loud what many athletes and parents already believed but were too afraid to say publicly. To others, she had crossed a line and intensified one of the most divisive debates in modern sports. And just like that, Sophie Cunningham was no longer simply part of the basketball conversation. She was the conversation. Why her voice carried so much weight? What made this bigger than a standard sports controversy was timing. Cunningham wasn't speaking from the margins. She was speaking during a moment when there was already under a microscope, when every foul, every rivalry, every post-game comment, and every clip involving Caitlin Clark was being dissected at internet speed. By then, Cunningham had already earned a reputation as Clark's protector in the eyes of many fans. Described that dynamic in vivid terms, framing Clark as the league's most polarizing megastar, and Cunningham as its most avid avenger. The article noted that Cunningham's profile had exploded in part because people saw her as someone willing to stand up for Clark when tensions boiled over. That matters. Because once an athlete becomes symbolic, everything they say starts landing harder than it otherwise would. Sophie Cunningham wasn't just Sophie Cunningham anymore. She had become, fairly or unfairly, a vessel for larger arguments, about fairness, protection, fame, media framing, league politics, and who gets to define what women's sports are supposed to stand for. And when someone in that position chooses not to back down, the noise only gets louder. The Clark effect made everything more explosive. There's another truth underneath all of this, and it's impossible to ignore. Anything attached to Caitlin Clark becomes bigger. Every rivalry feels sharper. Every opinion becomes national. Every clip becomes a referendum on the sport itself. That's not a criticism of Clark. It's just reality. Her presence in the league has magnified everything around her: the excitement, the scrutiny, the resentment, the ticket sales, the discourse, the pressure. And Cunningham's connection to Clark made her more visible than ever. ESPN's reporting made it clear that Cunningham herself understood that defending Clark changed the scale of everything. The article noted that Cunningham said she would have stepped in for anyone, but that it just happened to be Caitlyn, and that made all the difference. That single idea explains so much. Because in another season, with another teammate, maybe Sophie Cunningham's words become a headline for a day. But in this version of the version where Caitlyn Clark sits at the center of every storm, nothing stays small. Then came the moment that confused everyone. Just when people were settling into their chosen narratives, something happened that made the entire story more complicated. Before Indiana's game against Connecticut, cameras caught Sophie Cunningham and Brittney Griner sharing a light-hearted pre-game interaction. For fans who had spent days trying to turn the conversation into a rigid morality play, this side versus that side, this player versus that player, friendship versus ideology, it was jarring. Because real life doesn't always cooperate with online scripts. The internet wants clean villains and heroes. It wants permanent sides. It wants drama that can fit into a caption. But athletes live in locker rooms, on buses, in hotel lobbies, in practice gyms, in years of shared experience that fans never fully see. And so this moment hit people with a strange kind of force. It reminded everyone that human relationships are more layered than public controversy. That doesn't erase disagreement. It doesn't erase the intensity of the issue. But it does reveal something important: players can occupy the same league, carry different experiences, stand at the center of public debate, and still interact as people instead of as hashtags. That reality made the whole story more uncomfortable for people who wanted it to be simple. And maybe that's exactly why it mattered. Meanwhile, the basketball kept getting bigger. Lost in the controversy was the fact that the Fever were playing serious basketball. And that can happen in sports more often than people admit. The drama gets the clicks, but the games keep changing the stakes underneath the noise. At the time, Indiana entered the break at 17-10, having won 5 of its previous 6 games, according to ESPN's reporting during All-Star Weekend. That's not a side plot. That's one of the most important parts of the whole story. Because when a team starts winning, everything intensifies. Criticism gets louder. Support gets louder. Every player's public role becomes more meaningful. Every off-court controversy gets absorbed into a larger story about momentum and identity. Caitlyn Clark wasn't just surviving the spotlight, she was trying to lead a winning team through it. Sophie Cunningham wasn't just speaking into a vacuum, she was doing it while attached to one of the most watched teams in the league. And the Fever weren't heading into the break as a curiosity anymore. They were heading into it as a team people had to take seriously. The physicality around Clark wasn't just a talking point. One reason emotions stayed so hot around Clark is because the debates weren't only theoretical. They were attached to visible moments on the court. On June 25, 2026, they announced that Phoenix Mercury star Alyssa Thomas received a flagrant foul 2 penalty and a 1-game suspension for recklessly making contact with her fist to the throat area of Caitlyn Clark. The league also said the act was deemed a non-basketball play after post-game review. That official league statement matters because it removed the ambiguity. Fans argue about intent all the time. They argue about whether someone is embellishing. They argue about whether contact is overblown or undercalled. But in this case, the league reviewed it and acted. And once that happened, it fed directly into the existing belief among many Clark supporters that she was being targeted with a level of physicality that had become a story in itself. Even people who didn't agree with every surrounding media narrative could see the obvious truth. Clark was playing under an intensity of scrutiny and contact that would wear on almost anyone, let alone a young star still learning how to carry a sport's expectations on her shoulders. Then Barack Obama walked into the story, and this is where the week took another turn. Because sometimes, amid non-stop sports noise, a single voice cuts through the chaos not because it's louder, but because it sounds calmer, wiser, and more grounded than everything around it. During All-Star Weekend in Chicago, former President Barack Obama surprised the league's All-Stars at practice on the indoor basketball court at the Obama Presidential Center, which had opened in June. According to an WTTW, he shook hands, posed for photos, spoke to the players, and spent time interacting with stars across the league. It was also the first professional sports league to use the center's basketball court. And then came the moment with Caitlin Clark. Obama told her, "You're great. You're fantastic. Don't let all this nonsense get you down." He continued by reflecting on how difficult fame can be at a young age, telling Clark not to lose her joy. That landed hard. Not because it solved anything. Not because it ended the debates. But because it sounded like exactly what Clark probably needed to hear. Not strategy. Not spin. Not a talking point. Just perspective. Why Obama's words meant so much. Clark later admitted the moment got to her. According to ESPN, she said she was trying to navigate a lot while playing basketball, and that hearing those words from Obama was meaningful. She also said it was a reminder to treat people with grace and respect. That quote says a lot. Because for all the noise around her, Clark's own framing remained strikingly human. She didn't answer like someone trying to win an online war. She answered like a young athlete under enormous pressure, trying to keep hold of the reason she fell in love with the game in the first place. And that is what makes her story resonate beyond fan bases and arguments. The spotlight on Caitlin Clark has never just been about threes and assists. It's been about what happens when someone becomes a symbol before they've had a chance to simply grow. Obama's words mattered because they acknowledged that burden without turning it into pity. He wasn't telling her to run from it. He was telling her not to let it steal her joy. That's different. And it's powerful. Chicago became the perfect backdrop for the week. There was something almost cinematic about all of this happening in Chicago. A league celebrating its 30th season. A newly opened presidential center. A rising wave of attention around women's basketball. A player carrying the sport's brightest spotlight. Another player becoming a lightning rod for a culture war issue. And all of it unfolding during the league's marquee weekend. Reported that Obama praised the players collectively, calling them extraordinary and telling them that people were paying attention to their excellence as the game continued to grow. That's a crucial detail. Because amid all the controversy, the growth of the was still the larger truth hanging over everything. The sport is bigger now. The audience is bigger now. The scrutiny is bigger now. The stakes are bigger now. And growth doesn't just bring celebration, it brings friction. More fans means more passion. More visibility means more judgment. More money means more politics. More attention means every unresolved tension in the sport becomes impossible to hide. That week in Chicago felt like a collision between all of those realities. Then the All-Star Game delivered, and when the actual All-Star Game arrived, the basketball gave fans another reminder that this league has the talent to back up every ounce of attention it's getting. According to ESPN, Team Spoon defeated Team Coop 129-122 in Chicago, in front of a record All-Star Game crowd of 19,783 at the United Center. Jonquil Jones had 22 points, 13 rebounds, and 8 assists and was named MVP. Caitlin Clark scored 17 points, hit 5 three-pointers, and added 5 assists in her return to the All-Star Game. That matters because it completed the week with substance. Clark didn't just show up for the cameras. She showed up and produced. And beyond Clark, the night itself reinforced the scale of what the is becoming. Record crowd. Historic moments. Big names. Big personalities. Big stage. Also reported that legends Cynthia Cooper and Teresa Weatherspoon were the honorary general managers for the event, a reminder of the bridge between the league's past and present. That's why the weekend felt so loaded. It wasn't just drama. It wasn't just politics. It wasn't just viral moments. It was also a celebration of the league's history, growth, and future, all happening at once. The real reason this story hit so hard, if you step back, what made this entire stretch so gripping wasn't any one quote or one clip. It was the collision of contradictions. A player speaks firmly on one of the most explosive issues in sports, and refuses to retreat. A league faces criticism over how its biggest star is treated physically, while that same star keeps trying to focus on basketball. A former president walks into practice and offers a message that sounds more personal than political. A supposedly clear public divide gets scrambled by moments of visible friendship and familiarity. A league under pressure still puts on a major showcase and draws a record crowd. That's why people couldn't stop watching. Because this wasn't clean. It wasn't simple. It wasn't tidy. It was real. And real stories are always harder to process than the fake certainty of online narratives. Sophie Cunningham's role in all of this, whether people agree with her or not, Sophie Cunningham forced something into the open. She became impossible to ignore. She made people reveal where they stood. She challenged the league's comfort zone. She gave her supporters someone to rally around. She gave her critics someone to push against. And she did it while occupying a very particular role in the public imagination, the defiant teammate, the unapologetic voice, the player who doesn't seem interested in trimming her words to make strangers comfortable. That kind of figure will always draw heat. But it also guarantees relevance. And in a league where visibility is power, Cunningham proved that a player doesn't have to be the biggest scorer or the biggest superstar to become one of the biggest storylines in the sport. Sometimes all it takes is timing, conviction, and a willingness to stand in the fire. Caitlin Clark's week said something bigger too, but if this story has a center of gravity, it's still Caitlin Clark. Because everything keeps circling back to the same haunting question: how do you remain yourself when the entire sports world is trying to define you in real time? Clark's week offered a partial answer. You keep showing up. You keep playing. You keep carrying the pressure. You listen when wisdom finds you. And maybe, if you're lucky, you hold on to your joy long enough to make it through the noise. That's what Obama was really talking about. Not just criticism. Not just media chaos. Not just fame. Joy. The thing that comes before the money, before the arguments, before the brand, before the spotlight. The reason a kid picks up a ball in the first place. And if Clark can keep that, then maybe that's the most important win of all. The ending nobody saw coming, because in the end, the biggest surprise from that week may not have been the controversy. It may not have been Cunningham's interview. It may not have been the Griner moment. It may not even have been Obama's visit. It may have been the reminder that even in the middle of all this noise, the still managed to look like exactly what it has been fighting to become: important. Important enough that every comment becomes national. Important enough that every conflict becomes cultural. Important enough that a former president shows up to speak to the players. Important enough that people care not just about the score, but about what the league represents. That kind of attention is exhausting. It's messy. It invites overreaction. It creates pressure that can swallow people whole. But it also means the league matters in a way it never has before. And that's the bigger story. So what do you think? Was Sophie Cunningham simply saying what she believes, or did her comments push the league deeper into controversy? And did Barack Obama's message to Caitlin Clark capture the emotional reality of this moment better than anyone else has? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more long-form sports storytelling with real facts, real tension, and the full emotional context behind the headlines, subscribe right now, because this story may have hit the all-star break, but the bigger battle around the is nowhere near over.